After that night in the clearing, I thought I could move on. I thought if I stayed away from the woods, if I pushed the memories down deep enough, the whispers would fade. But the void doesn't work that way. Once it touches you, it leaves a mark. It started small. A shadow in the corner of my vision that disappeared when I turned my head. The feeling of being watched, even in my own home. Then came the dreams. In them, I was always back at the well. The clearing stretched on forever, the sky a swirling vortex of black and red. The well stood at the center, pulsing like a heartbeat, its stones slick with something dark and wet. The whispers were louder in the dreams, a cacophony of voices that overlapped and tangled until they became screams. When I woke, I'd find dirt under my nails and scratches on my arms, as if I'd been clawing my way out of something. One afternoon, a week after my nightmares began, I saw Liam. I was walking home from school, cutting across the field that bordered the woods, when I caught a glimpse of him between the trees. At first, I thought it was someone else, a trick of the light or my imagination playing with me. But then he stepped closer, and I saw his face. It was Liam, but not the way I remembered him. His skin was pale and stretched too tight over his skull. His eyes were sunken, and his lips were cracked, peeling as if he hadn't spoken in years. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, watching me with those hollow eyes. "Liam," I called out, my voice trembling. He didn't respond. Instead, he lifted one hand and pointed toward the woods. Then he turned and walked into the shadows. That night, I confronted my parents. I told them about Liam, about the clearing, about the well. They didn't believe me, or maybe they didn't want to. My dad just shook his head and muttered something about bad dreams. My mom looked at me with wide, frightened eyes, but she didn't say anything. Later, I found her in the attic, going through an old box of photos. She didn't notice me standing in the doorway as she pulled out picture after picture of people I didn't recognize. Some were children, others were teenagers or young adults. Their faces were blurry, the names on the backs faded almost to nothing. But the fear on my mom's face was clear. "Who are they?" I asked, startling her. She slammed the box shut and turned to me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "No one," she said quickly. "They're no one." But I knew she was lying. The people in those photos weren't just forgotten. They'd been erased, their names and faces swallowed by the same thing that had taken Liam. The void doesn't just claim you. It makes you vanish. It wasn't long before the whispers grew louder. They weren't just in my dreams anymore. I'd hear them in the middle of the day, faint and distant, calling my name. Sometimes, when I looked in the mirror, I'd see the faces of the lost staring back at me, their mouths open in silent screams. One night, I woke to find my feet covered in dirt, my hands scratched and bleeding. The whispers were louder than ever, pulling me toward the woods. I tried to resist, to stay in bed, but my body moved on its own. The trees seemed to part from me as I stepped into the forest. The air was colder now, the shadows deeper, and the moonlight barely pierced the canopy. The whispers guided me, leading me back to the clearing. When I stepped into the circle of barren ground, the well was waiting for me. The well looked different this time. The stones were darker, slick with something that gleamed in the pale light. The broken frame above it creaked in the wind, the rope swaying gently as if something had just climbed out. The whispers surged, louder than ever, pressing against my skull until I thought my head would split. They weren't just calling me now, they were demanding. "Come back," they said, the words echoing in my mind. "Come back." I stepped closer, my heart hammering in my chest. The air around the well was thick and cold, like walking into a freezer. My breath fogged in front of me as I leaned over the edge. The darkness inside the well wasn't empty. It moved, swirling like smoke, shifting and writhing as if alive. Faces emerged from the void, pale and hollow, their mouths twisting into grotesque smiles. And then I saw him. Liam's face rose from the darkness, his eyes burning with a sickly yellow light. His lips moved, and his voice echoed up from the depths, layered with 1,000 others. "It's waiting for you," he said. "It's always been waiting." I don't remember deciding to climb down. One moment I was standing at the edge of the well, and the next I was gripping the rope, lowering myself into the void. The darkness swallowed me, and the air grew colder with every inch. The whispers were deafening now, a relentless tide of voices that pressed against my mind, threatening to drown me. About halfway down, the rope jerked. I froze, clinging to it as the whispers erupted into laughter. Something moved below me, a shifting shadow that rippled like water. "Keep going," Liam's voice said, though I couldn't see him. "You can't stop now." I wanted to climb back up, but the rope wouldn't budge. The void was pulling me down, dragging me deeper into its depths. My hands burned as the rope slid through my fingers, and then I was falling, tumbling through the darkness. When I hit the bottom, the ground was soft and warm, pulsing like something alive. The walls were covered in faces, their eyes watching me, their mouths whispering in unison. "You're one of us now," they said. Liam was there, standing at the center of the void. His body was no longer human. Shadows clung to him, twisting and writhing like living things. His eyes glowed with that sickly yellow light, and his smile was wide and sharp. "You came back," he said, his voice filled with malice. "They always come back." I tried to run, but the ground shifted beneath me, pulling me down. The faces on the walls began to move, their mouths opening wide, their whispers turning to screams. The last thing I saw before the void swallowed me was Liam, his smile growing impossibly wide as he whispered, "You belong to it now." They found me in the woods a week later, unconscious and covered in dirt. My parents said I must have fallen, hit my head, but I know the truth. The void let me go. For now. The whispers are quieter, but they're still there, waiting. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I see Liam's face, twisted into that terrible smile, calling me back. If you ever find a place that feels wrong, where the silence is too heavy and the shadows too deep, run. Don't stop, don't look back. Because once the void knows you, it never forgets. And it's always hungry.